Welcome back to Acne Beautiful with Morgan Elizabeth. Welcome back to Acne Beautiful with Morgan Elizabeth here at the Bowers Mansion. Let's talk about gluten and let's talk about acne. Who is the most likely person suffering from acne that would benefit from eliminating gluten from their diet? That's what we're going to answer today. So first of all, what's gluten? Most people think of gluten and wheat as the same thing. Well, that's because, wheat is like a really common grain that people consume here in America, and wheat is a common source of gluten as well. When it comes to gluten, you do not even need to remember what it is. But basically, it's a bunch of distinct and similar but distinct proteins. And these proteins are what gives bread its texture. Kind of makes it chewy and delicious. Definitely helps hold it together, bind it together. So that's gluten. And how has wheat changed over the years? Well, that's another piece of the puzzle that can help answer the question, why is gluten sensitivity on the rise? Now, there's a whole group, or there are groups of people who deal with wheat and gluten-related intolerances that actually have nothing to do with acne, right? Gluten and gluten-free has become so common in America. If you tell someone that you're gluten-free, they can get on board. They understand it more than they did a few years ago, more than likely. And you can buy gluten-free products all over the place. Now, just because there's a plethora of gluten-free products out there these days doesn't mean that every single gluten-free product is a quality gluten-free product, right? That's just something to remember when something becomes like popularized for financial reasons. Then the quality of it, we have to then sort of be a little bit more discerning, because you're going to have big corporations jump on that bandwagon and start pumping out those products, in this case gluten-free products, and everything that they use to make the gluten-free product doesn't necessarily make it a healthy gluten-free product. On the other hand, you're going to have smaller grassroots companies pop up as well that are going to create a very high quality gluten-free product. And then you're going to have everything in between. So there's always these pros and these cons that come with the popularization of a product on the shelves. So some negatives and some positives. So what are some common forms of gluten? Super duper duper quickly. Of course, we've already said it, wheat, right? So when you think of bread, you think of pastries, you think of like crackers and basically anything having to do with the grains that we consume in America. Gluten, right? Absolutely. Then you have some other common sources like bulgur, couscous, orzo, seitan, spelt, which is in that wheat family. And that's probably like your main super common ones. Now, gluten-free grains, these are pretty plentiful as well, and they include amaranth, sorghum, millet, of course your rices and your potatoes, buckwheat, even though it does have the word wheat in it, it's actually a gluten-free product. Quinoa, teff, and oats are naturally gluten-free, but as most of you probably know by now, there's often cross-contamination when it comes to oats. So if you're seriously gluten intolerant, then you do not want to eat oats. Now, we're not talking about gluten-related diseases here. We're not talking about celiac disease, for example. We're talking about acne and gluten and the link between acne and gluten and who would benefit from removing gluten from their diet. We want to know what that profile is for the person with acne, right? We're really not looking into celiac and all of that. So I'm just kind of listing these out just so that you have an idea of where to start if you're trying to avoid gluten. Also, along with that popularization of the gluten-free trend, it makes it really easy to find these products in the stores too, because the GF, the big purple GF label, if it's gonna be on the product, it will be there, right? So sometimes you only have to look for that GF label these days. But other than that, common sources are just gonna include things like cereals, right? Breads and pastries, all of your bagels, all of that stuff, granolas and croutons, dressings can often be a source of gluten. So here are some like oddballs: dressings, gravies, imitation crab meat, okay, soy sauce, caramel color, beer, processed lunch meat. Probably an important one because I still think a lot of people in America do eat like sliced deli meat. Some candy bars, weird. Soups, not all soups, but of course some soups. The whole point is to read the labels as much as you can or look for that GF label. Okay, vegetable meat substitutes, very important to know, because if you are vegan, seitan. Wait, is it seitan or seitan? Wheat meat is a vegan product, a vegan meat replacement, but it's pretty much all gluten. It's very, very densely packed with wheat protein. So you want to remember that if you are vegan. There are a lot of vegan alternatives out there, but seitan, if you are also avoiding gluten, would be one that you would definitely want to avoid. Artificial flavorings, gross, and modified food starch, also kind of gross. Those things can be a source of gluten. So now that you have that, you're at least armed with what are some of the grains that have gluten in them naturally? What are some grains that do not have gluten in them naturally? And what are the products that generally contain gluten-related ingredients? Has anyone out there heard of the blood type diet? So we have blood types, blah, 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 blah. How the heck do these different blood types emerge? Well, O is the oldest blood type. Just think O, oldest, right? When we had blood type O first, and no A, and no B, and no AB, think of the time of hunters and gatherers. What did we eat? We ate protein from animal sources. We ate nuts, berries, seeds, vegetables, tubers, things that we could hunt, gather from the land. There weren't a ton of grains. At least there weren't a ton of manufactured grains. Because why? Agriculture wasn't really around yet. It wasn't really a thing. We didn't start producing crops of things, crops of corn, crops of wheat, etc., etc. Now, as we move along the timeline of human history and we start to become, stewards of the land and produce agricultural items, and now we're planting and harvesting wheat, we're planting and harvesting corn, etc., 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 we begin to see a new blood type emerge, and that became blood type A. Same thing happened right down the line when we had blood type B emerge, and this is when we have a little bit more animal husbandry going on, and so we start, milking cows and drinking milk from the cows. Of course, this is all culturally related as well as humans began to just migrate and expand into other parts of the earth. So lots of things to keep in mind. Now today, here we are in modern society, and some of us are blood type O, some of us are blood type A, some of us are blood type B, some of us are blood type AB, and potentially, and over time, another blood type will begin to emerge. Now, some people do say that the newest blood type that will emerge is going to be a blood type that's adapted to a lot of the processed foods in modern society, in modern culture. So you can see how a blood type emerges because something in the diet and the lifestyle of the organism, of the human, changes, which forces that blood to shift and change a little bit too, and you get a different blood type. But there's a little history of blood types within the realm of human movement and the emergence of agriculture, animal husbandry, etc., etc., etc. Okay, now throw into that advents of modern society as well, monoculture farming, the overuse of chemical pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, fertilizers, glyphosate, a lot of potential allergens, a lot of potential wheat allergies and sensitivities have developed through the increased and heavy usage of glyphosate on our wheat crops. Now, there's also been lots of different hybridizations of wheat over the years. All of this comes into play in a very dynamic way when we look at how an individual develops a sensitivity or an allergy. Okay, now let's add the individual with acne-prone skin into the mix. So now we're looking at an individual person, and we have to look at that person's history, that person's digestive system, all of that, which is separate from the history of man and the history of food and all of this. So no matter which direction we're looking at dynamic, complex systems. And it's always important to take that into consideration when you are considering how a food or something of that nature affects you as an individual, not just now, but in the past and in your future self as well. Because we're always changing. And there are different things that affect our bodies at different times that can, over time, lead to the development of a potential sensitivity like one to wheat. The main profile of an acne-prone individual who would potentially benefit from removing gluten from their diet would be someone who has taken oral antibiotics or applied antibiotics to their skin once, twice, multiple times, you name it. These can be antibiotics prescribed by a dermatologist that you take orally or apply topically, and you may not even know that they're antibiotics because you may not be told that they're antibiotics. Now, if you have something like strep throat and you just go to the doctor because you have strep throat and the doctor prescribes you antibiotics and you have to take those antibiotics to clear the strep throat, well, you know you're taking antibiotics then, but that's just another scenario where you've taken antibiotics. Now, it's not necessarily very clear as to why antibiotics help with acne, but dermatologists have been using antibiotics in a variety of forms to help individuals with acne for a very long time. The reason they use them is because they tend to be effective. Now, they don't always tend to be effective for the long term, and they're not recommended for the use for the long term. But even one course of antibiotics is enough to wipe out your good bacteria. Unfortunately, several courses of antibiotics, which isn't uncommon for somebody suffering from acne, can really wreak havoc on your digestive system. And in fact, it's important to remember that those suffering from acne often have a digestive system that's a little out of that's a little out of whack, a little out of balance, or can be thrown out of whack or out of balance really easily. So we're kind of already working against the current when it comes to happy, healthy digestive systems and acne-prone individuals. So maybe you're one of the lucky few in America and in the world that's never had a course of antibiotics before for anything. Well, that's awesome, and that's something to definitely be proud of. But we also need to consider that, just for our own awareness, that antibiotics can be found in animal food sources in America if they're just conventional animals, as well as in the public drinking water, unfortunately. And these are just two facts of reality in our modern society that we have to consider and deal with. But thankfully, there are workarounds. So, of course, you can get away from factory farmed meat, which, does increase the chance of being exposed to antibiotics. If you're going to consume factory farm meat. And you can get away from factory farm meat in two ways. You can go more vegan, or you can choose to eat animals that were humanely raised and were allowed to live their lives out in a way that was natural to them. So if it's cows, those cows were allowed to graze and be out in nature. Chickens, they could find their worms and their bugs, and again, they had plenty of room to roam. It's those confined quarters with many, many animals that can lead to the spread of different bacteria such as strep, and then the needed use of antibiotics in order to control that and at least have a presentable product to the market, whether or not you consider that presentable or not. And then, of course, public drinking water has become more and more of a problem these days. Not only are we exposed to a variety of heavy metals and other just toxins in the public drinking water, there are pharmaceuticals loaded in the drinking water, drugs of all sorts, and even hormones from women's birth control. So just something to keep in mind, because even if you've never taken antibiotics before, by living in this world, you more than likely have been exposed to them on numerous occasions, just being a human. Okay, so what does it really mean, right? So you've taken some antibiotics and, oh no, my good bacteria are gone. Can I just take some probiotics? Probiotics are great. Probiotics are highly recommended. Probiotics would be one way to help build that healthy flora back up in your digestive system. Prebiotics are going to feed those probiotics, but we're not talking about probiotics or prebiotics right now. We're talking about what happens, how the intestinal lining of your digestive tract, of your large intestines, can become a little bit damaged, a little bit hurt, a little bit sad. So the mucosal lining, for one thing, is sensitive. And harsh things in the diet, harsh things in the lifestyle can sort of disrupt that mucosal lining. There's little tiny hair-like structures that also line the stomach and some of the parts of the intestines, large and small, called villi. And they have important jobs too, but they're delicate and they can be damaged very easily by different digestive upsets and issues in your microbial balance as well. Once that damage has occurred, you need to heal. But before you can heal the mucosal lining of your digestive tract, there's a step before that where you might start to notice that something like wheat wasn't giving you a problem before is now giving you a problem. You may not even notice it, but this is where this is like the time when the individual can develop that sensitivity to wheat that he or she may just never have had before. I mean, I grew up eating plenty of things that I couldn't eat after I had developed what I'm going to tell you next. So if you've ever heard of something called leaky gut syndrome, it sounds super freaking scary, but it's really just tiny little microscopic holes that develop in your digestive tract. And these tiny little microscopic holes basically develop from damage, and that damage can be inflicted in a number of ways. So let's go back to the individual that has taken some antibiotics before. Maybe you've taken some other pharmaceutical products as well to help treat your acne. And in the meantime, maybe you didn't get to really replenish your good bacteria, or maybe you tried, but your digestive system didn't quite recover, or maybe you didn't notice really anything at all, but you just went about your merry business, continued to live your life, still dealing with acne, ups and downs, it ebbs and flows like everything else, and you continue to eat as normal. You eat your wheat-based products, you eat sugar, you eat all of the things that you've always eaten. but your skin isn't getting better, and maybe it's getting worse, or maybe it's just staying the same, or maybe it's getting a little bit itchier or rashier. Well, now you're kind of in that stage, potentially, where you've developed the leaky gut syndrome. And that's just an effect of having certain antibiotics in your diet and not being able to fully repair and heal that mucosal lining of your stomach. And when this happens, the immune system is triggered because it has a job to do too. And it starts reacting to substances that were once considered harmless. So for example, you eat your bagel and tiny little microscopic particles of that bagel end up leaking through those microscopic holes in the gut, in the mucosal lining, which get into the bloodstream. And when they're there in the bloodstream, it's like a big uh-oh for your immune system, because tiny little pieces of bagel aren't supposed to be in your bloodstream. But we got leaky gut syndrome. So your immune system reacts, get rid of it. And now all of a sudden your immune system is almost every day, if you're eating wheat every day in some form or another, now launching an attack against wheat, because of this process that's developed with the leaky gut syndrome. And all of a sudden you have a sensitivity to wheat. You don't even know it. And you have to do basically all of this sort of legwork and backtracking to go back in time, figure out when it all began, and figure out what's going on, and how do you move forward from there. And it can be confusing, it can be disheartening, it can be frustrating. But fear not. If this is a profile that kind of sounds like you, then the best thing you can do for yourself is start eliminating gluten now. Go ahead, just get rid of it, and remind yourself that it's temporary. It's not forever. If you've reached the point where you've developed a sensitivity to wheat, and it can happen with other foods as well, but in this example, we're talking about wheat, and it does happen to be pretty common. If you've reached that point where you've developed a sensitivity to wheat, you're struggling with acne, and you don't know what's going on, you may or may not have taken antibiotics in the past or used topical antibiotics prescribed by a dermatologist. You potentially have had digestive issues in one form or another. Maybe they just kind of come and go. That is the most common profile of somebody with acne that would benefit from removing gluten from their diet. So just to review, who is the most common individual with acne that would benefit from removing gluten from their diet? Most commonly, it's somebody who has either taken antibiotics orally or used antibiotics topically, either prescribed by a dermatologist or by a family physician, either for their skin or for something else. Why? Because taking antibiotics, even though they benefit us in many, many ways, it wipes out all of the bacteria, the good and the bad. And yes, we can replenish those bacteria. And we do. We're expected to. And yes, probiotics and prebiotics can help with that. But what can happen during the course of treatment and over time? Because folks who struggle with acne, who do take antibiotics from time to time, more often than not, kind of like always have something in the background that they're using. And they'll take something for a while, and then they might stop and try something different, and then take something again. But this is something that builds up over time. And over time, what happens is there's damage that occurs to the mucosal lining of the digestive tract and to the small and the large intestines. And this damage is absolutely reversible. We can heal very easily. But it's just leaky gut syndrome. And that leaky gut syndrome develops slowly over time after some abuse to the digestive system. And when it happens, leaky gut syndrome is basically just teeny tiny little microscopic holes that develop in the mucosal lining of the digestive tract, which allow teeny tiny little particles from food to enter into the bloodstream where it's just not supposed to be. So your immune system, it needs to react and it needs to get those particles out. And when it does that, it then identifies something that was once innocuous and fine to eat as something bad, as an invader that you need to be saved from. So suddenly, wheat that you ate your entire life is bothersome to your body, to your immune system. And you keep eating it because you don't realize that anything's changed, and your digestive system is getting more out of whack, more imbalanced, and the leaky gut syndrome is not healing and maybe even potentially getting worse. You don't feel good, your skin's not clearing up, and now you have a sensitivity to wheat. So we have to reverse that sensitivity. We have to heal the mucosal lining of the stomach and the large and small intestines. Let those villi heal, those small hair-like structures. By the way, those also help us absorb nutrients from our food, which is super important, right? Because not only do we need all of the macro and the micronutrients just for healthy bodies and minds, but we need it for healthy skin too. We don't want to miss out on those. So that's the most common profile of a person with acne who would benefit from removing gluten from their diet, at least temporarily. Now, depending on you as an individual, because everyone varies, the removal of gluten from your diet, it could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be several months, it could be years. It could be for the rest of your life. It depends. It depends on you. It depends on your body. It depends on your experience. And you can't know the answer right now today. But you can start taking action today. You can start by going through your cabinets and reading some labels and deciding if you're going to finish those products with gluten in them, or if you're going to take them out right now, maybe put them in a very sealed, airtight container and save them for some time in the future, or give them to friends and family. But you can take action today by beginning to become your own advocate, by taking the knowledge you've gained from this video and stepping out into the world with a new perspective on your acne. Because removing gluten from your diet, just another piece of the Acne Beautiful puzzle, it can be life-changing for you. And it can really be the difference between struggling with your skin and healing your skin from within. When we remove gluten, it takes a little bit longer to see some results because the mucosal lining of your tum-tum is repairing. It takes some time to repair, doesn't it? Just know that your body is hard at work for you. Does it sound like something that would benefit your skin? Are you gonna remove gluten? Are you gonna do it? And I really appreciate everyone tuning in to talk about acne, to talk about why acne is beautiful, even if it doesn't feel beautiful, and to talk about why everything is working to your advantage, even if you don't think it is. Say it with me now. Everything is working to my advantage. Say it again. Everything is working to my advantage. I have clear skin. Clear skin wants me. Let it all out. We're out of here. This is Morgan Elizabeth with Acne Beautiful. I still need a haircut. Can somebody help me? See you guys later. See you guys next week. Please come back. And goodbye for now. That's it. See you next time.